Right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We have Louise Ball with us. I'm going to let Louise take it away. If you could tell us a little bit more about you, Louise, and sort of your background and what you do, that'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi everybody, thank you for joining us. Yeah, we're still waking up on a Monday morning, but hopefully we'll get some good information out. So yeah, my name's Louise. I run 11 Account Services and it's a bookkeeping practice based in Stockport. We do work with a whole range of different businesses, but we do have a focus on CICs, charities, and do lots of social enterprise work, because there's just so many amazing people out there and I just love working with them and seeing all the good stuff that they're doing. So I have done this presentation before, and I'm just going to start sharing the screen, if that's okay, because it helps prompt me along the way. Um, so hopefully everybody can see that. Yeah. Um, so there you go, there's me again, so I can introduce myself and it can remind me. Yeah, so everything that I've just said, I like to offer a friendly, supportive approach to helping you understand your numbers. I know somebody's mentioned about confidence and knowing the numbers and knowing the right sort of talk. If I do say anything that seems too complex, or saying the wrong words, what does that mean? Please just jump in and say sort of what do you mean by that? I do try and keep it at a more understandable level. So I've only been in this industry for 6 years. I was a nurse and I retrained. So I think I'm quite good at bridging that gap in between what on earth are they talking about, those accountants, and what us normal people understand. Um, so first I want to talk about what bookkeeping actually is. I get asked this regularly. What is the difference between a bookkeeper and an accountant, and what is bookkeeping? It's just recording. It's just recording the financial activity of the business. So it's making sure everything that happens is kept in a record somewhere. It can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. So you make sure that you're recording your income and your expenses accurately, managing your invoices, keeping copies of receipts, reconciling the bank. I can go into that in more detail further on, because that's one of those funny words, isn't it? Keeping everything organised and up to date. And if it's done properly, it's the foundation of clear, confident financial decisions. Because if your bookkeeping's a mess, your numbers are everywhere, you don't know what's going on. You can't really sort of go to an accountant for advice, because they'll be like, well, what are we looking at, what are we doing? They can give you really good, clear advice. You can make better financial decisions yourself if you know what those numbers are. So who needs to keep records? Basically everybody. CICs, charities, social enterprises, sole traders, limited companies. You all have legal obligations to maintain those financial records. It just depends on how your organisation is set up as to who you will submit those reports to at the end of the year. So it's really important when you're setting up, or when you're already in the midst of it, what are my obligations? Who do I have to submit this to? Is it Companies House? Is it HMRC? Is it both? Is it the Charities Commission? It's really important to find out who you are liable to submit things to. And why does bookkeeping matter? A lot of social entrepreneurs are looking for grant funding, looking for donations. And the most important thing about that, as those of you that are already in that path will know, is you need to be transparent and you need to be accountable. I know it's already been mentioned, somebody applied for a grant for admin, which is music to my ears, because I always sing for people to do that. And you will have had to submit, these are the costs that we're expecting to go out. But if you've got your bookkeeping there, you've got those figures straight away, you've got that number straight away. You can just look in your software or look in your spreadsheets and know exactly, what do I need? What do I need to ask for? And you've got the report there ready to send it. So it saves a lot of time when you're applying for grants. once you've got that grant, you've spent that grant, quite often you need to sort of send over reports to say where that money went. And again, if your bookkeeping's up to date, that's so much easier as a task to complete. You've got everything there, rather than it feeling stressful. You can make better decisions. You've got one pot of money. Where's it going to go? What expenses have we got coming up? What have we already spent money on? It really does help you sort of make those decisions much quicker and easier with less stress, which is what we all want. And it protects your mission. You know, you can explain, you can justify where that money's been spent, and get more support. Not that that was my last slide. That was out of sync. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I know somebody's mentioned discussed an interest in payroll. I put VAT and payroll together because they are two very important subjects, and they are two very complex subjects because they are different for everybody. But not everybody needs to know about them. You only need to mention VAT, you only need to account for VAT if you are VAT registered. And that comes with a threshold for when you have to register, and that's if you're supplying VATable services over £90,000 in a rolling 12-month period. If you're nowhere near that, or if your income's all from donations or grants, you don't need to worry about VAT, and you wouldn't be issuing invoices that mention VAT anywhere. If you do become registered for VAT, you do have to keep more accurate records. You do have to keep digital records and submit those to HMRC regularly. But that's such a broad sort of subject. It really is different for every organisation. So it would, we could speak for weeks and weeks on that. So we won't go into that in too much more detail unless anyone has any specific questions. If you employ staff, you do need to keep PAYE records. So this means that monthly you will be submitting records to HMRC to let them know what you're paying your staff, what national insurance and tax deductions you've made from your employees and paid those over. You need to consider pensions, so you will be registering with the pensions regulator. And you do need to keep all those records together. There is a minimum threshold if you're only paying sort of one person a small amount, that you don't have to go through all of the rigmarole of submitting it to HMRC, but you still do need to keep clear records in your software. You can do this yourself. You can use softwares to submit all of these yourself. Because sometimes it can be easy to just click a button if it's a regular salary, but it can get quite complicated if you're talking about maternity pay, sick pay, adoption leave, and things like that. So it is a whole other speciality to be a payroll specialist, and they are available out there for support. So what are the best practices for doing your bookkeeping? Number one, because a lot of people don't do this when they're first starting out. And it's so understandable why, because you just sort of getting the ball rolling. Not everybody starts off in a business with a big pot of money to spend. And they do tend to blur personal and business finances. So the best thing you can do as soon as you can is get everything going through one bank account, at least one business bank account, everything separate. If you're a sole trader, legally you don't have to do that. But if you're a limited company, charity, or a CIC, you do have to have a separate bank account legally because it's a separate legal entity. But it just makes things so much easier. You can sit there and look at your bank statement as your first sort of port of call for your bookkeeping. Your figures are all there in and out. So track all income and expenditure. So making sure that everything that comes into the business is documented correctly. Was it a sale of service? Was it a donation? And was it a grant? And it's really important to keep those three things separately because they're all treated different for tax. So yeah, make sure everything's sort of recorded that's coming in. And everything that's going out, you do need to supply evidence of where that spend went. When you're submitting year-end accounts, you're not submitting all your receipts to HMRC. They just want the figures, but they can come to you within a 6-year period and say, we want to see X years records, and they will ask for the evidence. So Bank statements are a great starting point, but you do need to have that evidence for each line that's sort of gone through that bank. So make sure everything's recorded and that there's evidence kept. And use simple, effective tools. I will always recommend using accounting software, because that helps you, enter one thing and create lots of different reports easier. But obviously they do come at a cost most often. So use whatever works for you. If it's a spreadsheet, if it's any other system, ideally not paper these days, but yeah, just keep it simple.
Can I ask you a question, Louise?
You can, please do.
And it might be something that you're covering, but I just wonder whether you have any examples of, or whether you can talk through when you say track all of your income and expenditure, is that just as simple as just having a list of things and a list of costs on one tab and then sort of the income coming in? You know what I mean? Like how would you actually do that? Do you do that all on one document, or what does that look like when you say
Yeah.
track?
So the way you record this depends on what you want to get out of it. What do you want to see at the end? You could have really fancy spreadsheets that are linking this to that report and this to that fund um, and software which will do all of that for you. Or if you're a very simple structure, you could simply get your bank statement. If you could get a CSV of your bank statement from your bank, which is better, so it's put into a spreadsheet, and you can pull out all the income. Where did all that income come from? And pull out all the expenses. Where did all those expenses go? And make sure they're recorded. You can keep it as simple as that. So at the end of the month, you've got an in and an out. You can keep it that simple, or you can do more detailed. So you can be recording the expenditure in categories such as travel was this total for this month, stationery was this total for this month, and so on, and really break that down. It is better doing that way, because then when you're coming to make those decisions, you've got more detail. You can look, right, where do we need to save money? Why are we spending so much on printing? How can we make that more efficient? So if you've got that really broken down, you can do it that way. Spreadsheets are great to start off with. Softwares built specifically for accounting are better, because you can attach copies of your receipts in there. You can, like say, you can pull out reports. A lot of them you could submit year-end accounts through them. You've got everything together. So if you can fit that into your budget, it is a really good tool to use, an accounting software.
Is there any kind of um, is there anyone in particular who accounting software is better for, or do you just think any type of business model? So if you're a sole trader, for example, is using software as necessary as it would be for a charity where you have to track so much, or just do you think it's just useful for everyone?
I think it's useful for everyone. The way things are going, HMRC are making changes, and they are they brought making tax digital for VAT in a few years ago, which meant that all records had to be submitted digitally, and there had to be a digital backup of that record that was sent through. They're also now bringing making tax digital for income tax in. From the next tax year, people whose turnover was more than £50,000 in the last tax year, will have to submit quarterly records. Then the year after, that threshold rate is coming down. So eventually, I think HMRC are going to want digital records for every organisation. So I think the sooner you can get on board with that, the sooner you can get used to working in that way. Once those changes come in where you have to submit it, it's going to be so much less stressful. It's going to be ready there to go.
Great, thank you.
So there is a bit of going back over myself, but they are important points to make. Key financial documents that you should keep. Invoices. Invoices should be sequential. They should be kept, a record of what invoice went to who. If you are using a software, they do automatically give you the next sequence, next numeric sequence. And if you were ever to have your records looked at and there was one deleted or voided somewhere, and number 9 was missing, it could raise queries as to you could have got that paid in cash and then thought, well, I'll delete it and won't keep it in the records. Not that anybody here would, I'm sure, but that's the kind of thing that they're looking for. So if you can keep things like invoices in a sequence, it just helps remove the queries at the end. Receipts and bank statements, like I've already mentioned, you do need to keep evidence of the paperwork, the receipts. Um, but they can be digitally stored. It doesn't need to be files and files and files. Everything can be stored digitally. Did this talk to somebody last week and they mentioned that they'd kept all of their records digitally, but then didn't pay the subscription for that digital filing and they lost all of everything on the cloud. So it's reminded me to make sure I back up more regularly and also just sort of pass that on to it's great. All of these cloud softwares are perfect for that, but have a backup somewhere as well. I'm trying to do that regularly. Payroll records already mentioned. We do need to keep those. They can be in the software, or keeping a record of what you've submitted to HMRC. Grant and funding documentation. It's important to keep these because we could be sort of looking in those lines of vatable services. You can say, no, it's a grant. This was to spend as we wish doing whatever project, just to prove that it wasn't a vatable service. And just so you've got that paperwork to know what you're due to spend that on and keep things together where you can. And then, of course, your annual accounts and tax returns. Hopefully, people will sort of be getting support with those from their accountant, but do keep hold of those yourself and keep them on file. Because as I mentioned, you can be asked from HMRC Charities Commission to look back over previous years.
I'm just going to check in with everyone just to make sure everybody's happy so far. Just
Not lost anyone.
it's sometimes hearing just annual accounts and HMRC
Yeah,
can
it does
just
it to
turn
me as
you
well.
off.
So I can stop and remind.
Is everybody happy? If there are any questions, please do.
I have a question. Sorry. When you say keep digital receipts, what does that mean? Is that like when we use the card to pay for something and then it's got the name of the place we've used it?
Yeah, sorry, good point. Keep a receipt of everything that you spent, whether it's a paper receipt or an email, store it digitally, store it in a folder somewhere on your computer or in the cloud. So you could take photographs of the paper receipt and then you can
Right.
throw that
Okay.
paper receipt away, and then you've got a digital record of that to store somewhere. So it's saying you don't need to have folders and folders of files and notes everywhere. You can store that somewhere altogether online.
Is using your card in a certain place, is that classed as a receipt because you've spent it like at the place? Do you know what I
No,
mean?
and a lot of people do this to go, well, it says on my bank statement that I spent.
Yeah.
So, in certain circumstances, it might be enough. So, say you've spent money at Adobe and you're an illustrator, that's your job. You can see Adobe is a software that a lot of illustrators use. So you're going to say, well, that is, it's obviously going to be a business expense.
Yeah.
But if that illustrator uses their card and spends £20 at Tesco, they could have been buying paper. They could have been buying pens. They could also have been buying, beer. So that wouldn't be enough. That wouldn't be enough to say, oh, well, it was for that. But if you've got that receipt to say, no, look, this is what I bought. I bought pencils, paper. Well, it's a business expense. It's
Right.
absolutely fine. So HMRC don't necessarily mind what you're spending your money on, but they mind that you're spending it on a legitimate business expense. So it's very different between businesses. Like I said, the illustrator is buying loads of easels and paintbrushes and paint. If I bought that as a bookkeeper, I think they'd definitely be querying what you're doing there, Louise. Is that definitely for your business? But if I could justify that and say, no, absolutely, I did a bookkeeping workshop where I integrated art into making it more fun and easier to learn, then they're right, okay, fine, no problem. But you've got to be able to explain why you've spent that money.
Okay.
You've got your receipt, easy peasy.
Thank
Just
you.
while, just while we're talking about really good question, Liz, and just while we're talking about receipts and using your card, is it still the case? It used to be, and I'm just not sure if is it still the case that you need a VAT receipt rather than the receipt that sometimes you get because you used your card? You know what I mean? How you get that kind of funny thing that the merchant gives you
Yeah.
that sort of has your bank
Um,
account details on it?
yeah, so you can get a receipt for, again, like from anywhere that just sort of says card spend and doesn't have the detail on of what you actually bought. So
That's
it is
fine.
better to ask for a till receipt. It doesn't have to be a VAT receipt unless you're VAT registered.
Okay.
So if you're VAT registered, absolutely be that annoying person everywhere you go. Can I have a VAT receipt? Can I have a VAT receipt? If you get an email with a bill on, with the receipt on, sometimes they'll email you and it won't be a VAT receipt. So if you are VAT registered, then you need to go back and say, no, I need a proper one. And legally, they do have to supply a VAT receipt if they're VAT registered. But yes, do check that the receipt that you're getting from the till has some detail on it as to what you've spent, and isn't just the card receipt.
And does it have to have like the shop name or anything on it, or is it just the detail that you're looking for?
They will sort of generally. I think I've come across any that don't have a name on it, but ideally, a perfect receipt would have where you bought it from, what you bought, and what date it was, and obviously the value of it.
Great. Cool. Thank you.
And my question is, for instance, our accountant cannot be everywhere at one point because maybe we have only one card and maybe the volunteers are willing to go and do the shopping or run and do this and that. Is it okay for us to put the money on the volunteers' account so long as they bring the receipt? And then how do we back it up maybe in case maybe we are audited? I don't know how.
I think that I've got a slide somewhere that does mention about volunteers, because it is one that comes up a lot, especially in the VCSE sector. How it should happen, best practice, is that person pays out of their pocket, gets that receipt, submits a volunteer expense claim form to you, which details what they bought, why they bought it, with the receipt attached. Somebody who is a manager or a supervisor reviews that, agrees, yes, it was a legitimate expense for the charity, signs it off, and then they're refunded into their bank account the exact amount. What you shouldn't be doing is say, oh, here's £10, go and spend it. Or you can spend up to £10, just give us your receipt, and it's not quite right. Especially if you're busy, Ruth, like you say, you're growing, you're busy, you've got multiple people here, there, and everywhere. You could end up getting those all back, and it doesn't quite add up. There's some money missing somewhere, and especially as a charity, every penny really needs to be sort of on the nose. Really, make sure that it's all in there and documented. You do see that it is something that just come up, is so sort of, obviously you don't want people to be out of pocket, especially volunteers. Quite often for these organisations, none of us are millionaires. We're just all trying to sort of do a bit of good and help people. But it just avoids you as a charity sort of being in that awkward situation.
Louise, just another question as well. With money coming in, say if people do give donations and they can't use the QR code or transfer it, if they give cash, it's happened before where people have given me cash and then I've transferred it from I've kept the cash and transferred from my personal account into the business account and then just put donation on it. Is that good enough for an incoming money?
Yeah, because you've got an explanation, you can document, as long as you document somewhere, Liz, like where you got that money from, and then it was paid in, or it's kept in somewhere, or it kept in the accounts. This is what happened and why. It shouldn't be an issue. Obviously, again, the best thing to do would be to go to the post office, pay in that cash, or where a building society bank, paying that cash into the account, so it's not getting mixed up with your personal. Just to avoid, again, further down the line, say you accidentally transferred too much and then they had to transfer it back into your account. Somebody looks back in that in 3 years' time, is like, why did Liz get that money out of the account? It could potentially raise questions, and so best practice would be to deposit that, which I know is not
time
easy in this day and age, and there are charges incurred as well, but that would be the best practice. But yeah, I have seen it still done where people are paying from their bank accounts or paying it in that way.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. So common mistakes and how to avoid them. She's probably me just saying the opposite of what I've said you should do. I do like to reiterate, and hopefully I don't sound like I'm nagging too much anyway. So yeah, common mistakes are mixing personal and business finances. And it's not just from a legal point of view, it's a fact of, you're setting up this business, you're doing this, you're buying this here, you're buying that there, you're busy. You might forget that you bought that out of your personal bank account and forget to submit that receipt to the charity or the CIC on your claim form. And then you're out of pocket. And then you go 6 months down the line, oh gosh, yeah, I forgot to claim that. And, no, everybody should be being reimbursed properly for everything that they're doing for their business. So it's as much that of making sure that you're sort of getting back and everything that's being claimed. And also, if you're missing claiming things for that reason, it's not a true reflection of the actual expenses that are being incurred in that business. Failing to keep up-to-date records is one. And, so many people do it because you're so busy running your business, doing your great things that goes to the side. You've got money in your bank account for what you want to buy next, so that goes to the side. And what that means is you can get to the end of a financial year, you've got a whole year's worth to do. It's so stressful. It is so much more stressful than just doing it periodically and just getting those little bits done at a time. And also you can think, oh gosh, we missed that back then. And it's much harder to sort of undo. Which, so the next point is the same thing, leaving bookkeeping until the year end. Mainly because you can miss things like, oh gosh, 6 months ago we should have registered for VAT because we hit the threshold, or I'm sure I bought that in that month, but I can't remember when that was, and so you're missing making that claim, or you're just not knowing until and your accounts need to be submitted 9 months after your year end as a limited company, CIC. So you could potentially not be knowing until, do the maths, 20 months after you've done something, whether you're actually in profit, what has actually happened in that business. So it's so much better if you can keep up-to-date records. Not understanding the importance of timely submissions. So like I just mentioned, that 9-month submission for year-end accounts for CICs, you will get fines. And obviously it's the last thing that you want to get done. So going back to the first slide of making sure you know who you need to submit to, when you need to submit to, and what those dates are, just to make sure you're not incurring any fines. Paying volunteers, which is one that, thanks Ruth, that's a really good question, and we've covered. I've heard people say things like, oh yeah, but I know she's not got any money and she's helped us out staying for a few hours doing this. So, gave her £10 towards her shopping. And, in the best will of the world, everybody's doing these amazing things to help support us because we're all good people and we all want to do good things. But unfortunately, people like HMRC don't really see things in the same nice way. And would need to have a reason why that was done. You can't pay a volunteer. You can only reimburse them for anything that they've incurred by supporting your organisation. So it's really, really important that you make sure that you're only reimbursing, you're getting that receipt up front, and it's definitely a legitimate expense. There are things that you can pay that you might not know, things like childcare, travel, look into it. Definitely, if you're working in an organisation that has volunteers, what exactly can we be reimbursing people for to make sure that they are being covered for out-of-pocket costs. And then this one is a big one, which does happen if you're not doing the other things like keeping your records up to date. How do you know how much tax you're going to be paying? We are at the end of January, so anyone that's a sole trader that's listening to this, hopefully your tax return will have been filed months ago and you'll know exactly what is due by the 31st of January. But if you're leaving that tax return until the last day and then you get that printout from HMRC that says you now owe £4,000 in tax and you've not saved that, that makes life a lot more stressful than getting it done at the year end and knowing where you're up to, or doing your accounts monthly and saving for tax. So yeah, it's overwhelming. It's very overwhelming when this isn't your world and you don't know, not that you don't know, but you're busy, you've got lots of other things going on. you hate numbers, your brain doesn't work in that way particularly because you've got a nice creative brain, which I'm always very jealous of. So these are a few little tips of how to sort of get it done, but avoid that overwhelm. Is use simple, repeatable steps. Have some sort of process. Break tasks into small steps. Just do a little bit and often, even if it's 15 minutes once a week. That's so much easier than 3 days at the end of the year. Schedule, sit down with your diary, have a look at when can I just schedule this in so you know it's going to get done. It's not, oh, I'll leave that because I want to do this instead. Block out that time and ask for help. There's plenty of organizations around like Flourish that will help, point you in the right direction or give you some tips or send you a link to a session that they've already run. Ask for help. Or like other people have got bigger teams, who in that team is good with numbers, who can you delegate that to, get some support, and use automation where you can. Things, again, I'm going back on about accounting software. I'm not trying to sell anything, I promise. But it is really helpful and it does sort of help give you those prompts of what you need to be doing. It does not do it for you. I will reiterate that. Has anybody got any questions on that before we move on to the next bit? So just want to, and this is going to be a very, very brief discussion about reading financial reports, because I know a lot of people sit there and just like, I don't know. They've done the bookkeeping, they sent it off to the accountant, the report comes back and they don't understand it. What do these words mean? A profit and loss report. You're going to get that in a business. If you're working in a charity, non-profit, it's going to be an income and expenditure report. They are the same kind of words. It's just obviously in a non-profit, you're not looking at profit. What you're looking at what's come in, what's gone out, and what's left at the end. So what's left at the end is usually what's going to be taxable. That profit is then where the tax will be applied. And so if you are a non-profit, you're going to look, right, we've got that amount of money at the end. You need to make sure that you're spending that back into your organisation, meeting your outcomes before you're getting towards the end of the year. So again, backs up another reason why it's a good idea to do that regularly. Balance sheet is another thing that your accountant's going to provide and create for you. Again, lots of confusing words on there. Essentially, it's showing what the business owns. So words like assets, and what the business owes, which is things like liabilities. So they are things like loans, overdrafts, or things that you've got suppliers that are still owed money that you've not paid yet because you've got credit accounts, or you've got customers, clients, grant funders that still haven't paid you anything in yet. That would all be reflected on your balance sheet. People talk about cash flow forecasting, cash flow reports. That isn't something that you have to do. It's not something that is going to be submitted, a legal requirement, or keeping everything together, but it is a good idea to do. This is looking at what's coming in, what's going out. People will say, well, I've got £500 in my bank. I'm obviously doing all right. I've obviously got profit. But they might have an invoice in their accounts for £800 the following week. So without looking at your cash flow, without knowing your figures, you're not going to be able to, you might get some surprises, unfortunately, that with your cash flow, making sure you've got enough money to buy things. And when you're looking at your reports, you're not looking for every penny, you're not looking for perfect, glorious, look at this, we're in profit, look at this, we've got all of these assets. Look at the trends, look at what you need, look at what you want to get out of that. Are we increasing year on year or are we decreasing year on year? You can look out for things that might not be quite right by looking at those reports. Any questions on that?
Thank you very much, Louise. That's great. That was a lot. I have questions, but please, if
Do
there
you
are
want
any
me to go back
questions,
to any slide as well? Please do let me know.
Brilliant. If there are any other questions right now, I'm going to ask a few, which might bring up a few other questions from everyone. But so you mentioned just at the end there, budgets, and I guess what's an easy way of sort of differentiating between what a good, especially if you're sort of just starting out and aren't playing around with a lot of money, or income and expenditure. What is the difference between bookkeeping and good budgeting?
The bookkeeper is recording the actuals, what's actually happening, what's definitely coming in, what's definitely going out, or what's already happened. If you've got those numbers, you've got those fundamentals, you've got those in there, you can use that to compare and to form your budget. So you can look at, right, I've signed up for this subscription this month. This is the first payment in my bookkeeping that I've just recorded. I know that payment's going to go out for the next 12 months. So pop that into your budget. You know that you're going to need to make sure you've got that money in for the next month, and so on and so forth. You know, what's going to be coming in. So this is all forming part of your cash flow forecast, but also your budgeting. If you know, right, I've got all of these expenses, these are my regular expenses, I'm going to need X amount each month, then you can look at how you're going to get that. What do you need to do to get that money in? And you can form your cash flow or your budgeting sort of forecast and plan, especially if you've got big projects coming up. You can look back at your bookkeeping and know, well, the last 6 months, we roughly, when we ran the last project, we needed about that. We spent about that much on food. We spent that much on travel. We can put those figures into our budget for the next project because we know it's going to be similar, or we know it's going to be more. With those real time numbers, the things that actually happened, it's just so much easier to be able to forecast and know, help support what you're going to be able to budget.
Brilliant. And when it comes to accountants and bookkeepers and keeping accounts and bookkeeping, what is the difference?
What is the difference? Do need to go into more detail on that on our first slide, don't I? Bookkeepers, and that can include yourself if you're doing it yourself for your own business. You're recording what's happening. You're recording those financial transactions. You're keeping up to date on a regular basis. So you're keeping track of all the cash in and out, all of the things that I've mentioned, and getting that all into reports regularly. From that, we can be doing cash flow forecasting, we could be doing management reports. So we're looking at what's happening month on month and forecasting and knowing what's going to be happening going forward. We're looking at the day-to-day. We're looking at the day-to-day financial accounts. Where accountants come in and some accounts do bookkeeping and some bookkeepers do accounts, so it does get a bit complicated. But breaking up those fundamental, like keeping them completely separate, accountant would then come in and look at those numbers. They're not going to sit there adding everything that happened day to day. They're going to come in and look at those numbers that have been broken down and categorized, and they're going to help give you advice. They're going to help provide analysis of those figures. And they're going to be able to give tax advice, and they're going to be able to submit those year-end accounts and using their knowledge to make assessments of the best way to treat things in your accounts to be most tax efficient or to be compliant and meet the needs that you need to do for either your CIO or for HMRC if you're a limited company. So they are the same industry, but very different roles. Bookkeeping's the day-to-day. The accounting is the analysis, and the tax advice and the tax prep.
And there's costs involved, isn't there? So
there are unfortunately nothing is free because everybody has their own bills to pay. So like mentioned, you can do your bookkeeping yourself. You can do your year-end accounts yourself, unless obviously you are a charity and you need to be looking at getting audits and things like that at the end, when obviously you have to pay specialists for that. Accountancy fees vary. they vary across the industry, of course, as you can imagine with anything else. It's not a sort of a regulated fee. Sole traders look at tax returns. You could be looking at anything from around £200 a year to submit your self-assessment tax return. Again, I'm just picking these numbers out quite vaguely. It's not something I offer, so it's, don't quote me on that if you go to an accountant and say, well, Louise said you can do it for £200, because it can be up to £700, because there are different complexities. Some people, if you've got sort of like rental income, that's another part of your self-assessment return. If you've got investments, you've got pensions, there's all these different elements. So as a starting point, you could be looking around £200. Year-end tax returns for limited companies, CICs, you can be looking around anything from about £600 to £2,000. Again, depends on complexity, depends on if you've got a nice, neat set of bookkeeping to hand over and they're like, right, fine, I can just get the figures from here, or if they're going to have to go back and look through all those figures and run up and create a bookkeeping fee on top of that. So the less work they have to do at that year end, if you can keep everything up to date, the cheaper it's going to cost you.
So yeah, I'm
Bookkeeping
going to
fees,
say,
yeah.
so having a good bookkeeping practice and keeping it up to date is actually going to save you money further down the line, even though it's going to take time.
Yeah,
Saves you money further down the line.
definitely. It saves you money on the accountant doing it. It saves you money because you are picking up on things like, why am I still paying that subscription? I forgot about that. Like I've mentioned, all the things that you might have missed claiming. It does save money. And it does help strengthen your business and help you to grow and make more money. And it's taking another sort of, yes, it's a cost, but if it's taking you a day a week to do it, or a day a month, what could you be doing on that day? Could you be charging out a day's consultancy, or could you be charging out, which more than covers your cost? So, and like somebody mentioned before, so this wasn't on the recording, but if you are applying for grants, if you are a charity or a CIC, you can apply for grants to cover the cost of these things. Obviously, it depends on what grant you're applying for, but you can apply for administration, either somebody who's an employee in your business, or just build it into your grant and no one have to pay an accountant £1,000 at the end of the month. So if I can bring in some money, some contributions from grants towards that, it's all part of running your business. It's an essential cost.
Brilliant. And when it comes to when you do get to sort of the accountant part of the process, you sort of mentioned a few things there, like pensions and property and premises and that kind of thing. So there are other things to consider, aren't there? And other paperwork that goes into it. So for a CIC, for example, you have other paperwork that you also have to fill in, as well as the numbers and that kind of thing. Is that true for sort of across the board, or is that just for CICs?
And there are always different things to consider, which is why I would always recommend working with an accountant. I'm a bookkeeper and know what's going on with my business, but as a limited company, I still use an accountant to do my year-end accounts. I'm not saying you have to, like if you have that ability and that knowledge, then you still can. It's not regulated and that you have to use an accountant. But there are so often things that are forgotten about or missed. And what we've talked about, we've got sole traders, CICs, CIOs, social enterprises. There's so many different varieties of business structure that all have different legalities and different forms to fill in and different things to be filed or different elements to be considered. And that's why it is good to consult with someone, just make sure I've not missed anything. What else could I be adding in? Because I hear a lot of accountants saying, "Oh yeah, they've done their account, they've got their they've done the self-assessment for the client. It's all ready. They sent it off for filing, and then they say, "Oh, did I mention that I bought a house last year that I rent out?" And they're like, "No, you didn't." So that's a whole other thing with whole other different sort of taxes to consider and a whole other way to manage, to then add that in. It's it can be very simple, but they can get complex. So just make sure you know make sure that that's the biggest advice I can give is what do I need to submit and have I got everything that I need and am I considering and looking at all the bases?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think that's all my questions answered. Were there any other questions that, like I say, you have a very qualified, very knowledgeable bookkeeper right here who wants to give her time to answer questions. So if you have anything that you're not sure about, whether it's from the presentation or just your own questions that you came with, please feel free to answer to ask Louise any question you have.
Hi, Louise. We just got a bit of funding to get some accounting software. I just wanted to know that if there is any that you recommend.
So, what setup's this for? Because I know you've got a few.
Community interest company.
Okay. So the main softwares that I use, I'm not sponsored by anyone, so accused of any bias. I use a software called Zero, which is the one
Right,
that
I've
I
heard
do
of that.
recommend above all others.
Right.
For tracking things like projects, funds, you can run off separate income and expenditure reports for each project, each fund. You can do a lot more with that, and I think it's quite user friendly. It is a really good software to use, and they're constantly doing updates. So whatever moves on and going forward, they'll be on top of that.
Amazing.
It does come at a cost, though, unfortunately, and it's not cheap. But it's comparable with others on the market. It's not like it's the most expensive. There is another software that I do recommend, which is called Free Agent.
Free agent.
And they are sort of bringing in more and more developments to be able to match these kinds of things. I think they do allow some tracking now, and they do have projects coding in there. So Free Agent is a paid software unless you have an account with NatWest, Royal Bank of Scotland, Bank of Ulster, or Mettle, which is spelled Mettle, which is a NatWest-backed challenger bank. If you have a bank account with any of those, you can get Free Agent software for free.
Oh, amazing.
Once you set it up, it's free for that period, for as long as you've got that bank account. It's always going to be free, and it is a really good software to use as well. So they would be my recommendations. So Zero is with an X, XERO, or Free Agent. But do have a look into sort of the bank accounts, because Mettle is a free bank account as well. But they might not necessarily accept CICs. I've heard sort of different things, but have a look into those too.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's really interesting. It's really good to know that it is free if you have bank account with those certain banks.
Yeah, especially if you can get a Mettle bank account, because it's a free business bank account with free accounting software. And Free Agent are a very supportive organization. Their website, they've got loads of training on what to claim, how to claim it, how to use the software. They'll do onboarding themselves with you. They'll do training. Or you can contact, your accountant or your bookkeeper and ask if they could do training sessions with you. So it's more specific for your business.
Brilliant. Really good knowledge. Are there any other questions for Louise while we have her? I think I'm not too sure if it's something that that is easily done without it sort of in front of us, but I have been asked in the past about, especially if you're a director, not necessarily having your own CIC, but you're a director of a CIC, and you're expected to sort of be able to read annual accounts, and you're not an accountant or you don't have any sort of accounts background. And there's terminology in there, things like turnover and that kind of thing, and the way that they are created, even if you have been doing your own bookkeeping and your own accounts, when you look at the annual accounts and what's submitted to Companies House, sometimes it can be a bit about, where did those numbers come from, or what is it that I'm reading? I guess, is there an easy way to kind of explain what happens to all those numbers when they turn into an annual account?
Well, it depends who's done them and whether they've done them right, doesn't it? I guess. I would
Very
say
good
if you
point.
are using an accountant and you do get that financial report at the year end, don't just file it away. Ask them to talk it through. What does this mean? Where's that number come from? Um, more accountants than not are happy to sort of be sharing their knowledge and sort of saying, yeah, this is where this is from, this is what this means. I think accountants like that more than you just going, right, yeah, it's done, filed away. Ask for that breakdown, ask what does that word mean? Where does that come from? I did have somebody come to me as a service to help them understand their balance sheet. And I was like, more than happy to do it. I can talk through what that word means and where that might have come through and what kind of things will have made that up. And they went away and they understood it and they felt really, happy about that. But it's like, your accountant should be providing that. And I do know most of them will be more than happy to do that, to go through. If you are doing it yourself, I would sort of say, should you be doing it yourself if you don't quite understand where those figures come from and what those words mean? How can you sort of know that they are definitely accurate and right in those right places? But there are, like, if we go back to which screen was it? Bear with me. This one, the basics of what a balance sheet is what the business owns and owes. So the words are going to be like your assets. Those are the things that the business owns. So they are things like buildings, cars, computer equipment of high cost, things that the business owns and could sell on. And then you've got words like depreciation, which are those things that can lose money over time. If you buy a car, personally, when you sell it, you're not going to get the same amount of money back because it's depreciated in value. So that's another accounting term that will be on that balance sheet, which can be accounted for as a loss in the accounts. I should have an example of a balance sheet so I can remember what's on it on the top of my head. And then you've got, like, say, money that's owed into you, cash that's held in the bank. All of these things will be shown on there. And then your liabilities would be things like loans, money that you're going to have to pay back at some point. It wouldn't be hitting your profit and loss account, so these things wouldn't have the same things on them. But it would be money that you do owe back at some point. So you can be profitable, but have a lot of liabilities that you still owe out. And that's when it does get a bit more confusing, and people are probably starting to glaze over a bit at those words. But it's literally what you own and what you owe. So you just need to make sure that you're understanding what assets do I have, and again, and that would come into your bookkeeping as well. You might not necessarily account for something in your profit and loss if it's an asset. You wouldn't, if you bought a computer for £5,000, you wouldn't want it necessarily reflected in 1 month's accounts, because then that would show that you'd made a loss that month or your profit was right down. You'd want that spread out across over the year, and that's when it becomes a bit more complex.
Yeah, that was big.
That's why I did try to go into it in too much detail, because
that was a big question to ask. So thank you for
yes,
tackling that. Thank you for
with a lot of
tackling that.
information in it, unfortunately, and there's no easy sort of way of doing it. You can research online, what do these words mean, but I would definitely sort of just go to that accountant or an accounting professional and sort of say, can you help me break this down? What do these words mean? Where might they have come from?
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Louise?
Yeah, mine was a question before, but while we have just been speaking, I've just gone to AI. I was about to ask Louise, how can I move our charity account to the either NatWest so that we can use the free software? But I've just gone and typed that the AI have put our a charity account. We bank with the Lloyd's, and they've said they have a free software, but they don't do payroll, but they do bookkeeping, they do invoicing if you're a customer. So I'm just thinking there is no need for moving. Maybe if I can, we can just try to contact them and ask them to take us through, and then we can use their services. So it's been quite informative. I'm so glad that I attended. I'm going back I'm quite happy. I've gotten quite a lot of information rather than even us paying for the Xerox, because maybe we have not reached that threshold to maintain it. We can use what we already have.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for just mentioning that.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. That's good to know that Lloyd's have one as well. I do think they are sort of trying to make things easier, and especially like I mentioned before, that HMRC are going to bring everything in eventually. I think at some point that has to be digital. So it's great that all the other banks are sort of being forward thinking and getting involved in software. So it's great to know.
Yeah, thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Ruth. It's worth finding out, isn't it, if the bank account that you're already with is also offering something like that service. That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions for Louise while we have her?
Yeah, just in case of any other trainings or wherever, just keep me in consideration. Just send them over, and then I can, if there is any other upcoming trainings on accounting.
Great. What sort of things would you like, Ruth? What would you sort of like to have training on?
It's just like, because now we've done like online, if you have an in-house or practical, whereby maybe we can have a go and then fire some questions, or maybe we go and try, and then maybe by trying we will find out a few hitches here and there, and then we are like, oh, and then we have you at hand, like we just either a phone call or maybe just in person, just to come in and maybe find out. Or maybe when we are applying for funding, we can consider maybe applying for that, and then you come and train like an in-house, whereby maybe you can train more than 2 or 3 people, not only one person that has the knowledge, at least 3 people who are dealing with the accounts.
Yeah, right. I'll leave that one for Jenny to knock down.
Yeah. I'm writing it down.
We have done sessions before at like drop-ins at Flourish before, so sure we can report back and have a look at doing that again. Yeah.
Interesting. And do you think, Ruth, that would be on how to use something like Xero, or is it doing accounts yourself on your own spreadsheets and your own books? Oh, I think you're on mute, Ruth.
No.
Yeah, I'm looking at maybe empowering a few other ladies that we work with, because they might not have that knowledge. So I'm looking to attend with them, and as well, like, because I mentioned earlier, we are growing, we are expanding. So once we are start attracting this big funding, we need to be like funding ready, like we are ready, rather than attracting the funding and then we are stuck. So we need to work ahead of the anticipation, maybe in the next 6 months, before we start putting the applications through, and then we start attracting this funding, and then we are not ready. So I want like maybe 3 or 4 people in the organization, they're already ready to start handling these accounting packages.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that, Ruth. It's great thinking ahead like that. It's brilliant.
Music to my ears.
Liz, you mentioned that someone in your organization already has some accounts experience, but you're hoping to sort of take on some of that role and some of those duties. How confident do you feel? Is there any particular area that you think, actually, I would need more training in that to be able to feel like I can take it on?
Yeah, well, like I said, we're about to get the accounting software, because at the minute we've got different incomes from different places, and obviously expenditure are going out of the same account. So it is getting a bit complicated. So we're hoping to get the software in place, and then Kate really wanted to hand a lot of the day-to-day stuff over to me, as in like the accounting and the admin and stuff, because she wants to be more on the practical side. So I don't know, I'm glad I did this, because I like, just even hearing the words and stuff associated with accounting gives you a bit more confidence. So thank you. I'm not gonna expect too much of myself. When we've got the accounting software in, I will be able to see what it can do and go from there. But I'm really glad we had that. I had to ask the question about the receipts because I'm not sure that we're keeping the proper digital record. I think we're relying on our where we've spent the money to kind of cover what we've spent it on.
Yeah, it's a good question. Really good question. Brilliant. Well, I'm glad that you're feeling a little bit more confident with the language anyway. I think that's part of the problem, isn't it? As soon as you start hearing, if you're not, if you're, I don't know, for me, my brain doesn't really do numbers. So when I start to hear accounting terms, my brain kind of shuts down a little bit. I have to sort of force it to listen. So yeah, just understanding some of the terminology is really useful, isn't it? Brilliant. Louise, is there anything else that, oh, sorry, Ruth, go.
Yeah, on that note as well, we are just working on our job, like a job description we are recruiting for trustees, and accounting is one of the things that we've put out. Like, we want to strengthen our organization and bring in expertise, because we've realized that all the trustees is kind of, they are nursing, it's quite different. Like, they don't have the expertise. That's why we are struggling. But if we are open and attract other people with different expertise coming in, like maybe accountant, HR, and they come into our trustee, we think we're going to be doing we're going to be on the right track. So in that case, I'll forward the application through to Louise and Flourish, so that at least if you have anybody, or you can share on your platform, and then we see if anybody is interested to come and join us, just to strengthen us.
Yeah, good. I like that. Like, use your connections, get it out there. Definitely, it's a really good way to get a really strong board of trustees. Is pick out those expertise. Definitely.
For sure. And please do put it on the Flourish Facebook group as well, Ruth. It's a really active group, and ask them to share it as well. That's but brilliant. Yes, like Louise says, use those networks. Well done. Excellent. Louise, is there anything else? Any sort of parting words you'd like to?
I was like to say, I know it feels overwhelming, sort of hearing all these words, and I know numbers make people sort of switch off, but I think the biggest take home I want to give people is just do little and often. It can feel overwhelming, but it's much more overwhelming if you leave it till the end of the year. It does get much harder, and you will find if you just do a little bit, keep on top of it, you will find it much easier, and keep it simple as you need.
Brilliant. At that point, I'm going to stop the recordings. I think that was a perfect ending. So thank you very much. Just